The second annual National Day of Prayer took place last week from July 9th to 11th in Ottawa. And I think we can all agree that Canada could use some prayer. But how much of a difference does it make? And, we're going to chat about this with Faytene Grasseschi. She is one of the organizers of the event. Faytene, welcome back to Bridge City News. So great to have you with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so Faytene, how did things go? Did you get a decent turnout of people attending?
It was absolutely epic, Jeanette, if I could say that. We had 400 leaders right at Parliament for an off camera. It was not live streamed. A full day of prayer, fasting. We had elected officials with us. I won't name names just to protect their privacy, but it was very, very powerful. We touched on some of the critical issues for our nation in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, which is the if and then, if my people will do this thing, if they will gather in humble prayer, then I will heal their land. That's the truncated version. And, when we think of healing from a biblical lens, we're talking about everything. We're talking about revival. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about national unity. We're talking about families, mental health, all this stuff. When heaven touches down, it changes everything. And we know that the Bible clearly says that when a nation is in crisis, this is the primary instruction on how to turn it all around.
Wow. Faytene, what age groups usually attend this event? Is it mainly older folks, or are you seeing more and more young people participate?
It's definitely intergenerational, and that is our focus, but there are different components to the weekend. And so, for example, on the Thursday, we had a training outreach component. We worked together with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, the National House of Prayer, did equipping schools. So that was amazing. Then we had an outreach component where the gospel was preached in the streets of Ottawa on Friday. So that attracts, a younger demographic for sure. The leaders gathering is senior leaders. So that does tend to be older generation representatives that are there, though we did have many next generation leaders there as well. And then, of course, the outdoor portion on Saturday, that was the scaled up aspect. We came together with the March for Jesus. And so there were newborn babies right up till senior citizens that were there. That was an intergenerational moment with several thousand in the streets and then on the field to continue in prayer for our nation. It was really, really beautiful to watch it all unfold.
I know a big part of the event was to pray for our government leaders. People tend to complain about politicians a lot, but do they pray for them? And do they need prayer? So what kinds of prayers went up for these men and women?
Oh, wow. Really good question. First of all, the Bible does say, first of all, pray for those in authority so that you may live peaceful lives. And so we understand as Christians that this is a part of our biblical mandate. So we were praying that God would give our leaders wisdom, that he would give them courage and understanding, that there would be a grace upon them to bring reconciliation in our nation. We know we are in such a divisive time. And that they would really have the fear of the Lord in their heart. And what does that mean? That just means a respect for biblical values, for biblical instruction, so to speak. And so we prayed for their families, we prayed for their safety, and there was a full flow, and there were prayers from the microphone that we heard, and were a little bit more scripted. But there were a lot of moments where we just got into small groups as well, and people just prayed out of the overflow of their hearts for our leaders.
Did you see any? Well, you did mention up at the top there that you did see some elected government officials take part in the event.
Yes, they were a part of the program and brought remarks, prayed prayers, were a part of the day. It was very beautiful to see.
And besides government leaders, what other areas of concern were being prayed for?
Oh, really good question. During the leaders gathering, we had two really strong focuses. One was on unity and specifically Western separation. We prepared and showed a video that showed the history between Ottawa and the West. And you could have heard a pin drop after this video played. We are going to be releasing this video for the wider, body of Christ, Canadian citizenry, because the requests have already been coming in for that. So we played the video, showed the history, unpacked, some of the tensions over the last 60 years. And then we prayed for that. We prayed for healing. We prayed for restoration for families in the West that have lost businesses and loved ones because of, failed policies during different times of our history. We also prayed regarding the demographic crisis in our nation. We did mathematical modeling on the impacts of abortion, how many Canadians are missing today because of the 4.8 million Canadians that have been aborted since 1969, including not just that 4.8 million, but the children and the grandchildren that they would have had if they had been born. How did that impact our tax base? Where is Canada at on our demographic data right now? It was some very, very chilling data that was shared. And then we prayed. We prayed for God to forgive us for the ways that we have left a debt and demographic devastation for future generations. And we asked for the Lord to help us to turn it all around. We also talked about the professional deficit that abortion has left for Canada, namely the number of doctors, nurses, entrepreneurs, lawyers, engineers that Canada is missing today because of that demographic deficit. Very eye-opening, very sobering.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, those are some very sobering topics for sure. When it came to Ottawa's relationship with the West, I find that really interesting. Were people kind of surprised to see what you had presented? Was it like, you said you could hear a pin drop afterwards? Was it like a sense of shock, or what was it?
There really was. And it was very, very interesting. And even that was eye-opening. We showed the video. Then we had a senior leader who's Airdrie based, who got up and responded and shared a personal story. Another pastor from Edmonton shared a personal story about his family losing their home. And then we had a Quebec pastor that got up and responded. And this pastor has been involved in national initiatives at the prayer level for literally 30 years. And he opened up with saying, "I had no idea." And what we come to realize is that it's not that people in the East don't care about some of the historical injustices and disparities. It genuinely is that they don't know. And so this is why media, your platform and the work that we do in our media work as well is so critical, because there's so much that the mainstream media just doesn't touch on, doesn't cover. And when they do, don't necessarily cover with the whole story. And so this was a very powerful moment where leaders from Quebec and Ontario said, I'm going to take this back. I'm going to take this back to my spheres of influence, and I'm going to talk about this. And we're going to begin to pray for Alberta, pray for Saskatchewan and the West with a heightened level of compassion and concern because of this.
So interesting. Faytene, obviously Canada has a multitude of church denominations who disagree on any number of issues. So was there a wide representation of churches taking part? I would imagine there'd have to be.
Yes, there was. Now, I want to say this. We didn't go around and survey folks and say, hey, where do you go to church on Sunday?
Of course not.
But there were Catholics, there were Alliance members, there were Baptists, there were what we call Baptist-costals. We had people on every end of the spectrum, but all coming together with one heart and in one spirit. It was very, very humble, and it was so beautiful in that way. I saw leaders reconciling, leaders even that work in the political faith intersection that have had falling outs, and I saw them reconciling in that room. It was absolutely beautiful and very tender.
Yeah, for sure. I would imagine this would foster greater church unity across the nation, attending something like this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Faytene, when the Bible speaks of healing the land, what would that look like practically speaking?
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's everything. I think when heaven touches down, it just changes everything. It changes an atmosphere. It changes people's hearts, changes how they connect with one another and deliberate with one another, how they consider one another. And that affects absolutely everything. I believe that healing has to do with the economy. It has to do with our national divides, and unity has to do with healthy families, people not struggling with mental health and addiction because they have encountered something greater than their struggle. I think healing encompasses it all, and that is really what we are driving towards. We want to see a nation transformed into the beauty that it can be.
And some viewers, of course, might ask, does prayer actually make any difference at all? So are we seeing any results in Canada?
You know, Yes. We've been at this for 25 years now. And I will say this with some of the prayer gatherings that we've been doing, the National Day of Prayer just happened 2 years ago, but we've been involved in many others. And there are times where you gather and pray and you can literally see a tangible shift within a week, within 2 weeks, you see a certain, I remember one time we were in Vancouver and we gathered, we prayed for a bill regarding human trafficking to pass. Well, within 2.5 weeks, that thing was humming through to the Senate, and it was like a tangible shift. And then there's other times it's kind of like your hair, it's things are happening, things are growing, things are changing, but you don't necessarily notice it the next
Things are
minute.
graying.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's more like a snapshot down the line. But one thing that we know is that if we are people of faith, we can trust. And if you don't pray, definitely, you can't expect anything to come of it. If you do pray, your heart is transformed. There's a deepening unity, which will lead to something beautiful down the line. But you also may see those dramatic shifts and answers to prayer that we have seen in the past. And, maybe give us a few days on this one and we'll see what happens.
Interesting. What do you think God is saying about the nation of Canada? Any thoughts on how close we might be to seeing what people might call a revival or an awakening?
Wow, that's a really good question. Number one, when I pray for Canada, I feel the love of God. God loves Canada. I believe that there are some things that we have done as a nation that profoundly grieve his heart. And, a father can be disappointed in some things, but still have a deep tenderness and love towards his kids. And I believe that that's God's heart towards Canada, that he has the best in mind for us. He's not sitting up there waiting to kind of beat us with a bat. He wants to see our nation be everything that it can be. In terms of revival, absolutely. I am hearing from churches, it's interesting when things get darker and tougher and people are shaken to the core at what matters most in life, when they're having a hard time paying the bills, it can drive them to their knees and to ask questions in a way that doesn't necessarily happen when things are easy, right? And so I am hearing a testimony from churches all across Canada that people are looking for the Lord, that they're reaching for the Lord, that there are unprecedented levels of people coming to faith in Christ, getting baptized, and particularly in that next generation. I really believe that something is happening in Canada, and time will only tell the full result of some of these things, but people are turning to Christ, I believe, in a way that we have not seen in quite some time. At least that is the sense that I'm getting as I talk with pastors.
Any more prayer events on the horizon, Faytene?
Well, we're always mobilizing prayer. There are 24/7 prayer rooms that are happening, at least 2 of them right now that I'm aware of, and many vibrant prayer ministries all across Canada. But this time next year, we will be back in Ottawa for the National Day of Prayer number 3.
Three.
And we are believing that we're going to be able to work together and walk together in a way that when you and I are gone, and we're on the other side, hopefully peering over the balcony of eternity, that our children and grandchildren will continue on in this virtue of unified prayer. So mark it in your calendar. It's either going to be the 2nd or the 3rd week of July, 2027, but we will do it again. And I hope you're there.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing with us today, Faytene. We really appreciate having you back on here at Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it as well.